250th anniversary celebration of the publication of poems of various subjects, religious and moral. Really a celebration of Phyllis Wheatley. My name is Stephen Mansfield. I'll be your MC for the evening. Let me please introduce just a few honored persons who are among us. All of you are honored, but especially His Excellency Ambassador Francisco Campbell from Nicaragua. Sir, thank you. His Excellency Ambassador Mohammed Idris from Sudan. Thank you, sir. Chargé d'Affaires Lucia Charinda from Mozambique. Thank you. And then also a special welcome to the distinguished representatives from the embassies of Bangladesh. We're going to pause at each one of these. Please let us know who you are. The Gambia, where are you? Which is, by the way, the birthplace of Phyllis Wheatley, as you'll hear this evening, I'm sure. Georgia? Yes. Somebody loves your country when somebody over here says yes. Guatemala? Where is Guatemala? There. Italy? Wonderful. Welcome to you. And Rwanda. There you are. Thank you. I would also like to introduce Mr. Martin Brown, who is the Chief Diversity Officer for the Commonwealth of Virginia. I will introduce him further later, but Mr. Brown, it's wonderful to have you with us. And also a man I have read but never met, Victor Shibley, who's the publisher and editor-in-chief of the Washington Diplomat. Sir, thank you for being here. And special thanks to Miss Jan Duplain of Jan Duplain Enterprises. Many of you are here because of her personal invitation, so we want to say thank you to Jan. Thank you. Now I know why you were cheering everybody else. We are so pleased that you are here, and you'll have to forgive us. We are ridiculously proud of our building, and you can see why. This is a pretty special thing for us. It was built in 1907. It's a baby help me, Beaux-Arts. She speaks French, I don't. So I'd have said Beaux-Arts, but she got me right. Don't correct me in front of people, baby. The architect, this is what's interesting, not just for me as a historian, but for all of us, I think you'll understand this. The architect was George Oakley Totten Jr. You probably don't know who that is. However, he was the architect for the Turkish, the Polish, the Belgian, the Norwegian, the Spanish, the Swedish, the Danish, and the first French embassy. Unbelievable. And he also oversaw the remodeling, one of the major remodelings of the U.S. Capitol. So we ain't letting this go, this building. We're hanging on to this for a while. By the way, here's a lesson in economics. Guess how much it cost in 1907? $25,000. Your car, more than likely. More valuable by today's standards. It's my privilege to introduce this evening Chairman Brett Fuller, who's the chairman of the board of this building, much beloved in the city. Some of you may know him as the chaplain of the Washington Commanders. He says if he did a better job, we'd be in the finals. You may know him as the founder of a number of social service organizations. You may know him as an author. You may know him as an advocate for African Americans in every way. But he's a special man. Brett, please come talk to us.
Welcome, fresh welcome. And we are, as a board, Stephen is our vice chair and I'm the chairman of the board. We are so happy you are here. And tonight is special, primarily because we are going to honor a woman who, in adverse circumstances, did something unusually great. And my hope is that all of us would leave a little bit better than when we came in, more informed and more inspired. My life is filled with a lot of inspiration from Phyllis Wheatley, and so it's kind of personal to me. My mother was an educator in Kansas City, Missouri. I grew up in Kansas City, Kansas. My father thought it was a really good idea to move us out of the inner city of Kansas City, Kansas, and into the suburbs of Kansas City, Kansas in 1966. If you haven't noticed, I'm black. If you know anything about 1966 suburbs, they are all white. It was safer on one respect, in that there wasn't open violence in the suburbs, but it wasn't safe for me. We broke the color barrier in our neighborhood. I broke the color barrier in my elementary school. And everybody knew my first name, they just didn't use it. It wasn't fun. I was trying to figure out, Mom and Dad, you moved me here because you thought it was a good idea for me? This is horrible. I didn't have a friend for the first 2 years in school. I had one angel, though, who really cared for me, and that was my first grade teacher. She would come by my house every week and give my mother a progress report. I thought that's what all teachers did. It was amazing how she cared for me. I lay that out because my mother had African American studies as a part of her curriculum in Kansas City, Missouri, because she taught in the hood. There was none where I was. So my mother said, I'm going to make my children learn, especially during the month of February. And so Phyllis Wheatley was the curriculum upon which we had to memorize in order to get treats. Every breakfast we had to memorize her poems. There were no penalties if we didn't, but there were great rewards if we did. And I'm talking about not just when I was 7, 8, 9, 10, every February we had to do this until I graduated from high school. And so Phyllis became my friend. I understood where she came from. Now, I didn't know all of her history, but I knew a lot of the inspiration behind which she wrote. And so I've always desired to get closer to her if I could, even though my distance from her was growing in that she lived in the 18th century. And so a couple of years ago, a friend of mine named Mark Mitchell, who has the largest African-American collection of literature in the world, he and I had crossed paths because we had similar interests. And I knew he had 3 books by Phyllis Wheatley, 1 signed. And for years, I've been trying to get him to give it to me for a really good price. He said, I can't sell you the one that's signed. And these are original copies. In the first printing, there were only 200. That's it. Nobody thought a black author would sell. And nobody in America thought it was worthy of being printed if it was a black author. And so she actually had to get it printed in London. Brought it back here, but there were only 200 printed. By the time we get to 2020, where I'm really trying to get my friend to sell me a book, he thinks there are only 109 left. I said, okay. I said, how much do you love me? And I saved up my pennies, and I talked to my bride, and I bought one. And again, it's about the cost of a car. It's not cheap. But if you'd like to put your hands on it and open it up, it's right over there. And you just please use the gloves. Appreciate that if you want to see it. But that's how much Phyllis Wheatley means to me. And so when I realized this was the 250th anniversary, I said, wow, what a moment. We can do something that celebrates her and educates everybody else, upgrades us in our understanding of African American culture and what people can do even in the midst of diversity. Now, the way we got here in this house is not necessarily separate from the story I just shared, but it's different. As Stephen said, I am the chaplain for the Washington Commanders, and I've been so for the last 21 years. Yes, it's all my fault. I'm sorry. I'm trying to figure it out. I really am. I don't know what else to do. But as chaplain, my responsibility is to care for the organization in its integrity and its morality, to help ball players and front office personnel and anybody else in the organization who wants to get wisdom about how to live best, making great decisions, how to trust people, what it means to say yes to things that you should and no to things you shouldn't. Primarily with ball players, but I have influence over the front office as well. And they ask me to do professional development seminars on a regular basis. Things where they require the ball players to show up as well as coaches and trainers and strength personnel to hear something that's supposed to upgrade them in life, motivational speeches. Generally, they bring somebody in from the outside to make that happen. There is an entire list of recommendations upon which each team can choose because many of them don't know what to do. And for years, they chose somebody to come in and talk about insurance or what it means to be safe at a traffic stop, a police officer. But they asked me one time, and this was about 15 years ago, Pastor, could you do something? I said, sure. And so I did something. And since that time, they've asked me to continue to do it. So for the last 15 years, I have been, as chaplain, helping the team understand how to live best with principles that are just packed and chock full of truth. I don't come with information that is outside of my wheelhouse. I tell them what it means to be a good dad. I tell them what it means to be a good husband. I tell them what it means to be an excellent leader. How do you do that? I upgrade them in their relational skills, their honesty in their own soul, so that they can be the kind of people that are really excellent outside of wearing a jersey. That became the inspiration behind the inspiration behind which we bought this house. I said, you know, if it's working in this environment, and most of the time, unless ball players are doing bad off the field, you don't hear about them. They make mistakes and then you hear. But the fact that many ball players don't make mistakes is really a tribute to many of the pastors or the chaplains' ability to help guide and reflect. And so I figured, you know, if I can do that for this team, I wonder if I can leverage that for the city. Gosh, I love my city. I love Washington. I came from, as I said, Kansas. And it's not that Washington just made me fall in love with it. Maybe that's your experience. The hospitality in Washington is not what it was in Kansas, that's for sure. I knew all of my neighbors in Kansas. I knew none of my neighbors in D.C. when I moved here 40 years ago. I had to make friends with them, though they did not want to make friends with me. Most people come to Washington to get something done or to acquire something. Nobody comes here to retire. Who does that? You come here to get something and take it with you to your next opportunity. And so it's not the place of respite, it's the place of opportunity. And I have been here for 40 years. And indeed, it didn't just drop on the inside of me by way of affection. I've grown in love with this city. And everything about me wants to help people be better people. I want to help leaders be better leaders. I want to help husbands be better husbands. And every wife said, yes. I want to help singles understand that their whole life doesn't have to center around another human being in order to find meaning. This is what I do on a regular basis, help people be better people. And I thought if I can do it with the Washington Commanders, I wonder if I can do it for the leaders in D.C., for the embassy personnel. Because everybody needs to be a little bit better at whatever they do. And if I can make a human being better at something, generally they become better at everything because I'm not just giving them skills, I'm increasing their capacity for greater character. And if I can do that, then that translates into everything they do. Therefore, they come to work better. They begin to serve better. They are employed in their service to humanity with greater purpose. And this is one of the reasons I said, let's do something for my city. Now, I'm 62, and so I realize I've got probably another 15 years of really strong, productive service before nobody's going to want to listen to me anymore. And my former life, what I've done in the last 40 years was really neat. But this is what I want to give myself to, and I needed a place to make it happen. And so I got some people together and said, this thing's for sale. You think we can buy this and maybe I can serve my community well? Having events like this that help everybody be upgraded? Do you think this would be a good idea? I got a bunch of people said, yes, let's do this thing. And so we acquired this property. Boy, it's a big risk because I didn't know you before I acquired it. You weren't in my relational wheelhouse, so I had no idea that you would even come to this, but here we are. And my hope is that we can leverage moments like this on the regular. We're going to do this for Phyllis Wheatley at least 4 times in this building for the next year. Her anniversary month at the 250th is September, and so we're going to throw a big party then. And so if your friends weren't able to make it tonight, we'll have another opportunity for them to attend. And Phyllis is an amazing human being. Now, she's probably one of the more controversial authors in the history of our country, especially in Black America. Primarily because she said some things that they don't really make black Americans emboldened to fight against the system that has enslaved them or oppressed them. Though she's pretty strong in what it means to be respectful and admiring and understanding of the African American situation. But the context in which she wrote needs to be always considered whenever you read what she wrote. You can't take her out of the environment and read her words well. Taken from Africa at the age of 9 or 10, in the Gambia, we believe. Senegal and Gambia fight over it. Back then, there weren't any borders. It was just tribal. But they both claim her, which is good when anybody wants to claim a black woman. That's a good thing. Fight over it, please. Came over here on a ship called the Phyllis, sold to a family called the Wheatleys, John and Susanna. They had 5 children, 3 of which passed. The latest had passed as her younger daughter. And we believe John purchased Phyllis as a replacement, thinking that maybe this could help. She was not considered a daughter, but she was kind of treated like a daughter. Indeed, she was enslaved, but they taught her Greek, and they taught her Latin, and they taught her English. And within 2 years, she had mastered English. Now, I'm 62. I ain't still done that. I haven't done that yet. Mastered English. How you do that? Within 2 years, she mastered it. And she began to write poems at the age of 14. Now, you got a 14-year-old writing poems. She didn't have enough perspective to talk about all the truths that are necessary to put it down in print. But she's got enough that makes us go, wow, that's amazing. And so I look at the context in which she's writing. Secondly, I don't think Phyllis liked anything about her slavery environment. Who would? Everybody wants to be free. In fact, when she came back from England after publishing her poems and having an audience with the king, we think that she came back and told her master, her mistress had died at the time. Susanna, the wife of John, said, listen, the only way I'm coming back is if you set me free. We don't have that recorded, but we believe that to be true because she was freed when she came back from England in 1773. So there's nothing about her enslavement that she appreciated. No slave ever wants to be that. But if she had written about the idea of abolition, who would have bought it? She would have been ostracized and nobody would have published it. And so she's got to figure out, how can I get some words down on the inside of people without ostracizing them before they hear what I got to say? An amazing lady. When she wrote these things, it's really a compilation. She didn't write them all at once. She wrote them over a period of time and then put them together and then went to publish them. She couldn't find a publisher in America. Nobody would publish a black woman. And when she was published in London, brought it back, and people were reading it and thought, black folk can't do this. They're not smart enough. They don't have the intellect. They don't have the soul, even though they believe black folks had soul. They don't have the soul that is wired well enough to their brain to create the kind of imagery that is necessary to create these poems. They don't have that. This can't be done by a black person. Indeed, there was a literary inquisition to determine whether Phyllis actually wrote this, made up of some founding fathers and, if you would, 1 degree of relationship away from founding fathers. 18 men who sat there and asked her questions and tried to prove that she either did or did not write it. At the end of it, they determined that she did. Sad that she had to go through that. But it became the first work ever published by a person of African descent in the history of our country. The first work. And there are 109 left, and that's one of them. We are privileged to be able to talk about this woman. She's one of my heroes. And whether you fall on the side of thinking that she should have been more radical, if you're a Malcolm disciple, not a Martin disciple, if you fall on the side of thinking she's more radical, I don't mind. I respect both sides. But I also know this, that in the poem that's going to be read tonight that talks about her journey from Africa to America, which is the most controversial, at the end of it, she talks about how white folk need to respect black folk. Very, very confrontive, rebukes white folk. And a 15-year-old doing this to grown men. Courage this woman had. And it is my hope that you listen with open ears tonight And then we're going to have a dialogue whereby you can ask questions and we can talk. There are no right or wrong answers. But there is value in all of us developing a common understanding of what the community believes so that we can go out feeling and being better informed about what we need to discuss. Thank you very much.
I'd like to introduce to you the eminent, elegant woman who is going to read to us from the poems of Phyllis Wheatley. Now, the last line of her bio says that she attended James Madison University, and she wants me to say, "Go Dukes," but I'm not going to say it. I refuse. What I will say is this. Lisa Matthews is a 20-plus year veteran of the Associated Press, where she currently serves as U.S. planning editor, responsible for next-day coverage and planning for major events. Previously, Lisa was the assignment manager for U.S. Video. She began her career with the AP in 1995 as a writer and in-house reporter for AP's Broadcast Wire. In 2021, Lisa served as the 114th president of the National Press Club. She led the club's first ever all-woman leadership team and expanded its outreach to historically black colleges and universities, offering journalism and communications graduates free one-year memberships. Before her current AP role, Lisa worked in public relations as vice president at Hager Sharp, where she developed media strategies. Now listen to this. You're impressed so far, but listen to this. Lisa has earned 2 Edward R. Murrow Awards. One in 2002 for outstanding coverage of the events on September 11, 2001, and just to show off, her second in 2010. Matthews is also the first working journalist inducted into the National Capital Chapter Public Relations Society of America Hall of Fame. She was also among the first class of honorees for the Multicultural Media and Correspondence Association's Sheroes in Media. So I believe this evening we have a Shero talking to us about a Shero. Please welcome Lisa Matthews.
Thank you, Stephen. I still don't know who you're talking about when you read that. Good evening. Our first reading tonight. Hymn to the Morning. Attend my lays, ye ever-honored 9. Assist my labors, and my strains refine. In smoothest numbers pour the notes along, for bright Aurora now demands my song. Aurora, hail, and all the 1,000 dyes which deck thy progress through the vaulted skies. The morn awakes, and wide extends her rays. On every leaf the gentle zephyr plays. Harmonious lays the feathered race resume, dart the bright eye, and shake the painted plume. Ye shady groves, your verdant gloom display, to shield your poet from the burning day. Calliope, awake the sacred lyre, while thy fair sisters fan the pleasing fire. The bowers, the gales, the variegated skies, in all their pleasures, in my bosom rise. See in the east, illustrious king of day, but oh, I feel his fervid beams too strong, and scarce begun, concludes the abortive song. Second reading, on virtue. O thou bright jewel, in my aim I strive to comprehend thee. Thine own words declare, wisdom is higher than a fool can reach. I cease to wonder, and no more attempt thine height to explore. or fathom thy profound. But, O my soul, sink not into despair. Virtue is near thee, and with gentle hand would now embrace thee, hovers over thine head. Fain would the heaven-born soul with her converse, then seek, then court her for her promised bliss. Auspicious queen, thine heavenly pinions spread, and lead celestial chastity along. Lo, now her sacred retinue descends, arrayed in glory from the orbs above. Attend me, virtue, through my youthful years. O leave me not to the false joys of time, but guide my steps to endless life and bliss. Greatness or goodness, say what I shall call thee, to give an higher appellation still. Teach me a better strain, a nobler lay. O thou enthroned with cherubs in the realms of day. Final reading. On being brought from Africa to America. 'Twas mercy brought me from my pagan land, taught my benighted soul to understand that there's a God, that there's a Savior too. Once I redemption neither sought nor knew. Some view our sable race with scornful eye. Their color is a diabolic dye. Remember, Christians, Negroes, black as Cain, may be refined and join the angelic train.
Wow. Beautifully done. Thank you. And go Dukes. You won me. I'm in. We'd like to have a panel now, a little bit of a discussion of Phyllis Wheatley, the poem, some of the sentiments that we've heard, just for a few minutes. So may I ask Lisa to return, please, up here to the table. Chairman Fuller, please, and also Martin Brown. And while he's coming, I'd like to introduce him a little bit more fully because he is also, this room is filled with eminent people. I also like the fact he's almost my size. This room is filled with eminent people, but let me tell you who Martin Brown is. He currently serves as the Chief Diversity Officer and Director of the Office of Diversity, Opportunity, and Inclusion under Governor Glenn Youngkin of Virginia. Chief Brown has extensive experience working in the private sector and state governments. I'm gonna go through his, just pogo stick through his bio because he's so accomplished. He was the commissioner of Virginia Department of Public Services. He led and managed over 17,000 employees in 120 locations. As policy advisor to the governor, he coordinated the state visit of Mrs. Coretta Scott King and the recognition of Martin Luther King Jr. as the first African American permanently memorialized on Virginia's historic Capitol Square. Amazing. While serving as Assistant Secretary of Health and Human Resources, Chief Brown helped lead Virginia's welfare reform effort. All of that came after, I believe, he worked in the public sector. He worked with hundreds of diverse individuals from 6 of the 7 continents as president of the Providence Management Group, a media and public relations firm, and as just to cap his resume, as manager of a Chick-fil-A franchise. That's my version of Go Dukes for him. Chief Brown is a graduate of Howard University and the Virginia Executive Institute at Virginia Commonwealth University. He and his wife need to live in the Richmond area with their 2 adult children. Now, for those of you who are older, you'll know when I say I'm going to play Phil Donahue and ask some of the questions, and I'll also give you a chance to ask questions so you think of yours. But let me begin with this question first. Each of you, ladies first, what does Phyllis Wheatley mean to you? And I'm going to move to the back of the room for a moment.
That's not a big question at all. So, first of all, I will just say that when Brett Fuller asked me to read these poems, I did not know who Phyllis Wheatley was. So I had to do a little, research. And I am full of joy and amazement, and I just hope that I read her in the spirit that she would have liked it to have been read. And working in news, I see amazing things every single day. And I'm a little angry that I didn't know who she was. I should have known. Someone should have told me, should have taught me growing up. And I'm just really full of a lot of heart tonight about her and her struggle. And something I said earlier, and I'll just share it now, and Brett said it, about no one wants to be a slave. Everyone wants to be free. But this young woman saw the icing on her cake, even though the cake was horrible, and the icing probably wasn't very good either. But she saw the good in the worst situation, which is something that I strive to do. So that's my thought.
Boy, so I grew up, my mom is a teacher, an educator. I heard about Phyllis Wheatley, didn't know about Phyllis Wheatley, didn't understand who she was. To be honest, up until this reading, had not fully understood who she was. I just hadn't. And I'm moved by it. I think that in my current position, there is a wrestling going on with, I guess the best term would be belonging, and who are we a part of, and how are we a part of, and why are we, what do we do, and why do we do it? And clearly she knew who she was, where she came from, but she had a sense of belonging because of who she was, not just where she was from. And so I'm moved by her. That the last poem I'm still chewing on, "'Twas Grace." Whoa. I mean, yeah, that's, it when you're writing a poem, you're chewing on every word, and every word is purposeful, and every word is deliberate, and every word is, you're choosing the right word. And so it's clear that she was very thoughtful in why she said what she said. And it's moved me as well.
Well, I've already told you how important she is to me. But even beyond what I said, if you are a woman, an African-American woman, who makes your living by crafting the words of English into things that allow people to understand truth better or reality better, then you are her child. This is her occupational child. This literary genius right here. Beyonce is her occupational child. She writes music with English and allows all of us to dance poorly. But Beyonce got her idea of lemonade from her. This woman, she was taken from her family. And we're not talking about a baby. We're talking about a 9-year-old taken from her family. And for her to have any positive perspective on that is stunning. Stunning. I mean, most of us never get over the trauma of our childhood. We're always blaming somebody. Mama, daddy, uncle, coach, some teacher didn't treat you right. We're always blaming somebody for how we are, why we are, who we are. She doesn't. She finds her God in the midst of this and says, somehow or another, you were able to help me understand you through that horrible thing called slavery. And I don't like that at all, but I like you. And through this experience, she was able not just to acclimate, not just to put her compass at due north, but to live with white and black folk at the same time. Black folk who may not have liked what she wrote, white folk who didn't like what she wrote, and stand strong every day and say, I know who I am. That gives me great courage every day, because surely my life doesn't come with the right set of cards. There are so many obstacles I've got. And every day I've got to figure out how in the world am I going to make this really good, even though it's really bad.
Let me ask the audience to be thinking about questions that you have, but I can't let a certain theme go, so you got to prepare yourself. And it's kind of odd that I, the white guy, am asking this question. But I got a degree in history and literature. I did study Phyllis Wheatley in graduate school, and I was confused by her calling of Africa pagan land. That was at least a little understandable from her perspective. But then essentially giving thanks, not for slavery directly, but for the forces that had introduced her to the Christian gospel. I'm gonna have fun with you, Brett, just for one, because we're such good friends. You seem less offended by this than I am. That's what I'm trying to say. What's going on here? Talk to us about that for a moment.
I don't know that she was against somebody like a Nat Turner. Anybody who was trying to fight for freedom, I think she would have been for. But I think that she came from a perspective that allowed for the truth to enter into people who were most oppressive and responsible for her bondage, enter into people so that decisions could be made for the broader good. And remember, the people who were buying her book didn't look like her. They were all slaves. They didn't have any money. So the people who were buying her book were white. And they had to read about her condition and realize this woman here has great value to me. Not just great value, but great value to me. Now, when it comes to the idea of thinking of Africa as a pagan land, I don't know that she was trying to be offensive. I think she was just trying to distinguish between the God she found in America and the one she did not have in Africa. And I don't know that she had, well, I think she used the English that was available in order to try to describe that. And that was the present day way to describe people who were not Christian. I don't think she was being offensive. I think she was just being different in her description. And I'm probably giving her the benefit of the doubt because I like her so much. But I don't apologize.
Okay, I'll let that one go.
Actually, this question is a great segue into what I felt very deeply in the readings. And of course, I don't know her body of work, but when she makes the distinction between I came to know a God and a Savior too, to me that is an incredible distinction, because one implies the understanding that there is a creation and a creator, but a Savior has to do with a path and with a choice. And so I feel like in her poem on virtue, you see, if this was the first thing I ever read of hers, I would say she's a transcendent poet, and that she's seeking transcendence through the words or trying to give meaning to what she's feeling. She's seeking transcendence, which is very different from seeking freedom, because transcendence is a personal path. And so I feel like if you were to put her in a category of transcendent poets from world literature, I think you could make an argument for her being someone who is aspiring towards something beyond just what she knew, just the day-to-day, the quotidian.
I would love, thank you. I would love for, my dear bride and I, Cynthia, have had 7 children. My dear bride and I, Cynthia, have had 7 children. And I wish I had had them memorize this one phrase, attend me, virtue, through my youthful years. That would have been great if I'd had my children memorize that every day. And she's inspired other than her parents. This is what's so amazing about this teenage girl.
Mr. Brown, talk to us about government and the encouragement of understanding Phyllis Wheatley in African American history. What can be done? You're an official. We're holding you accountable for all governments everywhere.
Sounds good. No. Oh, boy. We've got to know history. I mean, we've got to know and understand history. And I was sitting here thinking about Brett learning about Phyllis Wheatley. I suspect that she was taught in schools for many years by public schools for many years. But then there was a shift. And when that shift occurred, I suspect she was not taught, less taught, like other heroes and sheroes, you call them, Booker T. Washington, George Washington Carver, very successful people who resisted, yet overcame difficulty, who endured hardship. History is difficult. It is complex. It is challenging. It is, they say, to the victor goes the spoil. The people who win write the history, as they say. But when we talk about Phyllis Wheatley and Black history, I think that we are trying to regain some of her virtue, because her virtue is what helped her to overcome. What government is wrestling with right now are real barriers and perceived barriers. And the real barriers we gotta fight with every fiber in our being. We gotta overcome those real barriers of diversity and exclusion and those things. And the beautiful thing is that in 2023, we're fighting different battles than my parents fought in 1963, which is a good thing, which means that they won those battles. I've worked for 4 governors. That's crazy. I mean, right? I mean, it's wild. I mean, but some of the battles exist, but some of the battles that are perceived are actually more difficult to overcome than the ones that are real. And what I speak to is, if you've got people who believe that that glass ceiling is there and I can't achieve because of that glass ceiling, because I'm a woman, I'm, Black, whatever I am, and that glass ceiling, they're going to limit themselves to not being able to achieve or get through that glass ceiling. And I think it's government's responsibility to not only fight to break those ceilings in a real way, but I like the term and I think this audience will understand it, to empower agency. That we need to empower the agency of individuals, their will, their abilities, their freedom to overcome those barriers. And that is much more difficult. I mean, it's easy to, write a law and fix a law. But empowering agency, I mean, that's when you get into faith, you get into hope, you get into resilience, you get into perseverance. I mean, you got people who didn't know the King's English, but because of their agency, they're running multi-million-dollar companies, they're changing the world, they're doing all kinds of stuff. And so, and I don't know if that's government's role as much as it is maybe government's ability to maybe foster that, encourage that, and hope that that happens.
We have a few more moments, time for a few more questions. Any other questions from the audience?
How old was she when she died?
As beautiful as her early life was, as good as it could be as a slave, she married, when she came back from London, a man named John Peters. And John was a grocer, did his best to try to make ends meet, didn't do a very good job of it, wound up being imprisoned because he was in debt. They had 3 children together. The first 2 died, and we believe that the last one died with Phyllis at the age of 30. She was impoverished and had nothing at the end. It is a very sad story. Very, very. Depending upon whom you read, they fault John Peters for putting her in a situation that was impossible. But there's no proof of that. They weren't forced to marry. She wanted to marry. And he was a freedman. She was a freedman. So this was a volunteer moment. But they did not have a comfortable life. And this wonderful woman and unusual talent died at the age of 30. With respect to the numbers of works she published, because she got married so quick and started having children, she tried to start a new life. And we don't have any of her works published while she was alive after that. But we do know that we think her husband took the works that she did create and tried to publish them after her death.
Well, my question is a rather strange one, but I was wondering, you mentioned that both Zambia and Senegal were claiming her.
Gambia. The Gambia. Gambia and Senegal.
Right. I was so impressed with the flow of her work, and I was wondering whether any efforts been made to identify the dialect or the parts of Africa of either Senegal or whether she came from, because that flow that she, with everything, her work kind of just flowed, and I felt like I was back in Africa, listening to certain people talk or narrate.
Sure. This is R&B English.
But the dialect varies
Yes.
significantly.
Sure.
Even though there's small areas. I couldn't help but feel that is so much of an influence on her.
Absolutely. Senegal and the Gambia are neighboring countries. Back then, there were no division lines for boundaries, and so there were tribes. The Gambia was one of the major ports from which people were brought to America. Alex Haley, who wrote Roots, his brother George Haley was in Kansas City and were best friends with my parents, and our kids grew up together. George Haley was instrumental in Brown versus Board of Education. He was a lawyer. Came here in 1971 with the Nixon administration, stayed in Washington, D.C., became the Postmaster General, served in the Nixon administration quite a bit, and ultimately became the ambassador to the Gambia. Why? Because Kunta Kinte came from there. It was a going home in so many ways. So this is one of the reasons that the Gambia says, generally speaking, if an African comes from the West Coast, they came from us. And because Senegal is so close, they vie for the attention, and I ain't mad at them.
Lisa, final question for you. You've admitted the surprising fact, honestly, that you did not know who Phyllis Wheatley was until recently. Right? Is that what you said? Did I understand you correctly? Well, I'm wondering then, since I've enjoyed sparring with you, I was going to say to atone for your sin, but that's not, it's not really what I mean. It's not really what I mean.
Forgive me,
But
Father,
no,
for
I'm
I
just
sin.
playing. But does the press, does journalism have a role in making her story known? Education does, and we've already held Mr. Brown responsible for that. But does the press, does journalism have a role in teaching history of this vital importance?
I believe we do. I believe we do. Absolutely. Journalism is a service to the people. I see what I do every day as a service. So absolutely, it's not protect and serve, but it might be educate and serve. That's what we try to do at the Associated Press. And I'll see what I can do about that when I get.
Wonderful, wonderful. Let's thank our panel as they return to their seats. It's been a wonderful evening. Thank you very much for coming. We have a copy of this famous book for each one of you. Poems on various subjects, religious and moral. And also, if you would like, this is not a fundraiser, please don't think I'm not going to sell you soap or anything else. But if you'd like to make a contribution, some of you have asked, to the work of 2230, A House for the Nations, we can accept cash or check, and that's fine. Ramona, would you please come to the entryway? This is Ramona Antoine. She is the genius executive director of this facility, very gifted, Jamaican background, military background. Her CIA background scares me. So I stay 5 or 6 feet away from her at all times. But please see here if you'd like to make a contribution, and the books are out there. So thank you very much for coming. Enjoy your exit, and we look forward to seeing you.
One extra thing. We will hold events like this on Phyllis Wheatley's book and other things that we do. But if you would ever like to hold an event yourself in this building, you're able to do so. All you have to do is contact Ramona, and you can rent out this building, and we will help host whatever you'd like to do. It's been a pleasure. Ramona wants to say something? Yes?
And he's a little bit of a comedian, right?
Hey.
Okay, so, we actually don't have a book for each of you. And
Going all night with us.
we have a few books that you can have for a donation, but I'm sorry I did not get. I wasn't sure how many of you would show up. Jan, a lot of you are here because of this woman. Can we give her an applause? Thank you. And so I got a few books, and then this week, you all emailed me and said you're coming. And so if you have a donation, we would love to give you a book, and if not, come back to one of our events, and we will have a book for
There we
everyone.
go. I was right, ultimately. Good night. God bless.